This is Seventh Generation Warfare. I am your current host, John Nelson. And in this episode, we will be looking at willpower, free will, and determinism. If you remember all the way back to the groundwork I set for this concept of Seventh Generation Warfare, we talked about how war is a violent clash of wills, or at least the first four generations of warfare are a violent clash of wills. Fifth generation warfare is not violent, but it is still a clash of wills. I define sixth generation warfare as the war within inside yourself, trying to obtain and control your own will, and then seventh generation warfare is living your life in a way that helps set the conditions so that your children can control their will, or not just your children, but all your descendants, um, forever. If your children also pick up the seventh generation warfare fight, then it could go on forever. But what is will, right? So that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. I defined in another video that will is it's not just your desires. It's not just what you want. It's your desires in accordance with your abilities and also your conscience, right? So you might want something. You might say, I will to be able to fly, but I'm not going to sprout wings and I'm not going to be able to fly. So that can't actually be my will. That's a delusion I have of something I could do, but I can't do it, or defy gravity. I will that I defy gravity. Well, I can't do that. So that's not my will. That's a delusion I have. And also, in accordance with your conscience, you might say, I will to make $1 billion, but if I have to sell my soul in order to do it, that's not actually my will. That's probably stems more from an insecurity, or something within oneself, why they would put making the money above their own conscience of, like, I have to step on other people in order to make this money or get the promotion, or whatever. And that's just one example. So your will is also filtered through your conscience. So in the most broad sense of the term, your will is your desires, but through, looking through the lens of your abilities and your conscience. And I'm happy to evolve that definition. If anybody wants to comment their thoughts on will, but that's the definition I've been going with thus far in this concept of seventh generation warfare. That being said, our wills do come under attack, and we also put ourselves in vulnerable positions from time to time where we choose not to act upon our wills. These are kind of all actually one and the same thing, which we'll discover in a little bit, because it all comes down to what we choose to do in our actions. That extreme ownership that we have. But some examples of how your will could come under attack is you're driving what you presume to be a safe speed, but you still get pulled over by a cop, and they run you through the pullover procedure, and you feel like you've done nothing wrong. Your will is to continue to drive because you're acting in a safe manner, but flashing lights scare you into submission. Or a boss, or a boss asks you to write a fraudulent document that could be attacking, because you're conflicted of wanting to please your boss, but it's something that's not right. So what do you do? Or you're envious of something that somebody has, and you seek to one up them, or to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. It's not really your will. It's an internal thing that's making you feel that insecurity, that you feel like you have to keep up with the Joneses, or one up them. And you can also be put in vulnerable positions by your accepting of debt. You take on a giant mortgage, or you take on student loan debt. All of a sudden, your choices in life start to feel much more limited because you have to make that money in order to service that debt. You can't tell that boss that tried to get you to write that fraudulent report to fuck off because you need the paycheck in order to pay your mortgage. So getting in debt can put you in a vulnerable position. Being dependent on the approval of others, if you're not self-confident, self-assured, and you're always looking for approval from others, that's another way you are putting yourself in a vulnerable position as to your will, because other people can manipulate you just by giving or denying the approval that you're seeking from them. Or in another way, if you act in a way that receives vitriol from other people, I'm thinking like divorced people, well, they've put themselves in a very bad position to enact their will for the rest of their life. In particular, I'd say probably men more so, because courts tend to favor against them. But just if you go through divorce, you're still tied to this person, and now this person hates you, right? So that's going to affect all your decisions kind of going forward into the future, and that undermines your ability to act on your will. So now we'll get into willpower. Willpower is your actual, the force inside you that gets you to achieve your will by overcoming those obstacles. And the more of these obstacles you put in your way through your decision making, all the little decisions you make through your life, all those obstacles you put in your way make it harder for your willpower to overcome it. But at the end of the day, whether you accept it or not, your will is free for you to choose. Will always be free, but you might choose to negate it because the forces against it are so strong. But so, and now we're going to get into a little bit more of the philosophical underpinnings of what makes free will. And I'm going to read from a book called The Psychology of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden. It's an excellent book. He talks about it about 50 pages in or so. And yeah, this is kind of the philosophical underpinning of free will. So, free will, in the widest meaning of the term, is the doctrine that man is capable of performing actions which are not determined by forces outside his control. That man is capable of making choices which are not necessitated by antecedent factors. So that is to say that, whereas matter in the universe is a series of cause and effect, actions, and there might be actions acting upon a man, none of those actions determine what the man then does. So no antecedent factors are going to determine whether you do something or not. The fork in the road, there's always forks in the road in front of every action you do, and you get to choose which path you go on. Man's free will consists of a single action, a single basic choice, to think or not to think. It is freedom entailed by his unique power of self-consciousness. This basic choice, given the context of his knowledge and the existential possibilities confronting him, controls all other man's choices and directs the course of his actions. I skipped ahead a little bit, but basically what Nathaniel Branden says is he puts thinking first and foremost in, even before like free will. You are free because you can choose to think. You can choose to be in your conscious mind. You can choose to be present, and because you can be present, you can be self-aware. That gives you the ability to make those choices. If you are just running on autopilot or on muscle memory, or you're just letting your subconscious take the wheel, then yeah, your will, who knows what it's going to do. But it starts with that ability to be present in your mind. Skipping ahead again, we'll talk about determinism. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. But although most people would accept the fact that yes, we have free will, uh, I don't think they fully grasp or take ownership of it, or accept all the responsibility that comes with it. And they'll try to toss in their language and excusing their behaviors and things like that. They'll try to toss in some determinism. So we'll talk about determinism briefly. Back to Nathaniel Branden. Psychological determinism denies the existence of any element of freedom or volition in man's consciousness. It holds that, in relation to his actions, decisions, values, and conclusions, man is ultimately and essentially passive, that man is merely a reactor to internal and external pressures, that those pressures determine the course of his actions and the content of his convictions, just as physical forces determine the course of every particle or dust in the universe. So how I was saying causal relationships. Determinists, believe in essence that you and I are no different than a stone rolling down a hill, or a stone stationary, or anything else in nature. Our path is merely just determined by what it has happened to us. And then he goes on to explain what the biggest contradiction in this position is. Knowledge consists of the correct identification of facts of reality, and in order for man to know the contents of his mind, in order for man to know that the contents of his mind do constitute knowledge, in order for him to know that he has identified the facts of reality correctly, he requires a means of testing his conclusions. The means is the process of reasoning, of testing his conclusions against reality and checking for contradictions. But this validation is possible only if his capacity to judge is free, i.e., non-conditional. If his capacity to judge is not free, there is no way for man to discriminate between his beliefs and those of a raving lunatic. So a determinist can't make any value judgment about the things that come into their consciousness, because ultimately they're not responsible for their beliefs. They didn't choose it. They couldn't compare it to an alternative. They were just helpless to believe otherwise, as he says at one point in here. Continuing on, skipping ahead a little bit. A mind that is not free to test and validate its conclusions, a mind whose judgment is not free, can have no way to tell the logical from the illogical, no way to ascertain that which compels and motivates it, no right to claim knowledge of any kind. Such a mind is disqualified for such appraisals by its very nature. The very concept of logic is possible only to a volitional consciousness. An automatic consciousness could have no need of it and could not conceive of it. So just really nailing that point home, that if you're a determinist, you're not responsible for the thoughts in your head. You're also not responsible for your actions, which people like to get out of their wrongdoings by trying to say that they're helpless to do otherwise. But if you have free will, you can exercise it at any time, and therefore you are responsible for everything you do. No one made you do it. At best, you chose to override your own free will or negate your free will, and you did something that was wrong, but you're still responsible for it. So, and how this plays out is when fighting a sixth generation warfare, when trying to obtain your own will, you really have to take full ownership of your actions. You cannot hide behind I was born such a way, or I had no choice. I had to because X, Y, and Z. Maybe you still choose to do things on occasion that go against your will, but if you do, make sure that you are honest about why you're doing it. Do not lie to yourself, because that will just make it easier for you to lie to yourself in the future. And before you know it, your will is completely out the window. But as for seventh generation warfare, you need to be taking that full extreme ownership over your actions. You need to be exercising your will, so that your kids can see what it looks like for somebody to exercise their will, and to also hold them to that standard that they try to slime out of something by saying, that it wasn't their choice to do it. You got to hold their feet to the fire, and you got to hold them accountable for the things that they do. Because if you don't, they'll grow up and they'll accept more deterministic factors and excuses into their life. I wish I had better examples on how or what kind of things constitute deterministic excuses. But really, if you want to achieve something and it's within your abilities and it's not against your conscience, then go for it. Achieve it. So, anyways, that once again, that was from The Psychology of Self-Esteem, the second half of this video. Great book. I recommend it. I'd like to hear your comments about willpower, free will, and determinism. I hope I did not bore you, because this is a critical cornerstone of seventh generation warfare. You have to know what your will is in order to secure it, and you have to also know what will is in general in order to secure it for your children. So thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you on the next one. This is Seventh Generation Warfare. I'm your current host, John Nelson.